Welcome to FNB Money Moves, a podcast series where we help you to make better financial decisions. I am Maya Fisher-French.
And I'm Ester Ochse.
And together we're going to solve the world's problems.
Or at least start with their finances.
Okay, Esther, starting with the finances, the problem we're going to solve today is the misunderstanding between debt review and debt consolidation and when each solution is appropriate. And Esther, I don't think people realize that debt review should only really be used as a last resort. This is a time when you cannot come to an agreement with your creditors and you can no longer afford your repayments. And then on the other hand, what I find is that when it comes to debt consolidation, which you do through your bank, people do not always understand the cost implications. So I think it's really important that people understand how all of these things work and how they work together. But Esther, do you think that people sometimes rush to these solutions a little bit too quickly rather than making lifestyle changes?
So Maya, that's a very good question. And if you look back in the last couple of years, there's been a significant increase in the interest rates, the fuel prices, inflation is through the roof, food prices are through the roof. So there's a lot less disposable income that's available to the consumer at the moment. And then what happens is they're feeling that pinch, and then they potentially get a phone call that sounds like a good idea or it's oversold to them. They don't understand the full implication of it. And then there you go, they're in debt review without understanding it. So, and I think that's important, and why we're unpacking this today is so that we can literally show you what are the implications of making that decision so that they're fully informed and don't, as you say, jump into it very quickly.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key point. It's just, I think everyone looks for a silver bullet, right? And it's a bullet at the end of the day. It usually causes some harm somewhere along the way. So you need to know what it is. And to help us unpack these concepts and the different solutions available, we're joined by Denise Hartley and Elmarie Dreyer from FNB Collections. So, Denise, I want to start with you. You are head of debt review at FNB. So I think you're probably the right person to answer this question. For our listeners, what is the difference between debt consolidation and debt review? And why is it important to understand the difference?
Thanks, Maya. Yes, so a lot of people do get confused by the two concepts, and they're sometimes used interchangeably. So debt consolidation is a new loan. It is a loan that pays off one or more of your existing credit agreements, and it is given to you by a credit provider, whereas debt review is a tool for people who are experiencing financial distress, for people who are over-indebted. It is a legislative process, which means that there are legal consequences and rights associated with the process. A client can go to a debt counselor. The debt counselor will negotiate on the client's behalf with the various credit providers, try to come to an arrangement, and the important thing to note is it is a legal process. So it does need to go through the courts. There are certain costs involved with regards to that as well. And I think the most important thing is you just need to understand what are the consequences of debt review and what does that mean for you and your family going forward.
And one of the ones that I pick up the most actually is people don't understand that you cannot exit debt review until all your debt is repaid. So I get a lot of people coming to me saying, my life has changed. I've had a promotion. I've got a new job. I can now resume my debt repayments as they were before debt review. I want to exit. You can't exit. I think that's probably the biggest misunderstanding I find.
Correct, Maya, and a lot of people think there's a time limit. So I get that question quite a lot too, is it 5 years, is it 10 years? And the answer is, it's however long it takes you to repay all your unsecured debt and any vehicle finance. So that is how long you will be in debt review. And while you are in debt review, you cannot use any credit. So no facilities, no credit cards, no store cards, and you cannot apply for any new debt as well.
Elmarie, I want to bring you in here with another question that I get quite frequently, and this applies both to debt review and even things like debt consolidation where you've restructured your debt perhaps with the bank. People say, if I restructure my debt, will it affect my credit score?
So it's not a simple answer, Maya. So it really depends on the mechanism, right? So if it is a pure debt consolidation loan, so you applied for that as a credit product that happens to be used to consolidate some other credit products into one, it won't, right? It'll merely show as a new credit agreement on your credit profile, so it'll impact your exposure, but it won't necessarily have a negative impact. If it is a restructure that you enter through a more informal discussion with your bank, so credit providers more often than not are willing to come to the party when consumers are distressed, if it's through a process there where your credit provider agrees to extend your term, reduce your interest rate, or do something to assist you, and that is a restructure, that will definitely be listed on the bureau. And then if it's something through formal debt reviews, certainly that will reflect on the bureau, right? But I guess the important point is, specifically if it's in the context of something more informal, so where you approach your credit provider and they go through a process, the knock that your credit profile will take is significantly less than it would if you simply just stick your head in the sand and you just let things run their course, right?
Absolutely, Elmarie. I think that's such an important point. People worry about, oh, will it affect my credit score? Not paying is the number one thing that will affect your credit score. So do anything except not pay, because that's going to be the worst knock. And I'm going to go back to you, Denise, because earlier we spoke about the implications of debt review and what people don't understand about debt review. But I also pick up issues around debt restructuring or debt consolidation, specifically if people extend the period of the loan to make it more affordable. And I'll give you an example. If you've got a loan for 65,000 Rand, for example, maybe it's at 24%. You've got 22 months left on the loan, and the installment's 4,500 Rand, as an example. You come to the bank, you say, listen, I just cannot afford this 4,500 Rand a month. The bank says, okay, we'll restructure it. We'll even drop the interest rate to 21%, for example, and we'll restructure it over 58 months. Now, suddenly, your installment drops to 2,500 Rand a month. So you're saving for 2,000 Rand a month. But total cost, Denise, total cost goes from just under 100,000 Rand to 145,000 Rand. So my question, Denise, was what should people look at when they're looking at debt consolidation?
Maya, that's a great question. And it's not just for debt consolidation, it's for any credit agreement. Be aware of what your total cost of credit is. By law, it has to appear in your contract. The other thing that you can look for is also your credit cost multiple. That shows you how many times you will repay your original debt. So in other words, if you take out a 50,000 Rand loan and your credit cost multiple is 1.5, you will be paying back 1.5 times your original capital. That will be on your credit agreement. So have a look at that. And it's about juggling and understanding what is best for you. If what's best for you is to reduce the strain on your finances currently now, then sometimes paying a little bit more is a good thing, but just make sure that you know what you're paying and what you're doing, and that it is the right option at that particular time.
And I think it's important. I love that credit multiple. It's a nice, easy way for people to make a comparison. And I think it comes back to Esther's point earlier as well, that people mustn't just jump to these as, rather, if you need an extra 2,000 Rand a month, maybe look at things that expenses you can cut, Esther, rather than, taking on a more expensive debt.
Yeah, so 100%, Maya. I mean, we've done a bit of research in the bank on how much people are spending on sort of discretionary spend. Now, you and I both know what is discretionary spend. It's, eating out, makeup, treats, clothing, all of that type of thing. And we see that there is a little bit of capacity to reduce that as well. And, we're not the fun police. We don't want to say to people, don't eat out and have treats. But, reduce some of that and put it towards things like paying off your debt. And I also just want to touch on something that Elmarie mentioned earlier, which is, this sort of just putting your head in the sand. That's the last thing that you can do. And we strongly recommend that, for anyone that's got credit or is struggling is, take the bull by the horns, literally sit down, have a look at what your debt positions are, and then see, is there a way that I can sort it out via some money moves, freeing up cash and that type of thing? Or do I need to speak to my credit provider? Do they have a solution? And if that's not working, then you can go for the last resort, which is the debt review that Denise spoke about.
Absolutely. There's stages, first see the simple things. What can I do simply before I go and commit myself either to a more expensive debt or into something where I'm in debt review for 5 to 10 years. And maybe, Elmarie, just to end off, what advice do you have for individuals who are wanting to regain financial control?
So I think my colleagues have touched on some very important points, but if you listen to this whole discussion we've had today, the real strong underlying message is do not ignore the situation, right? So be proactive, understand your position that you're in, see if you can improve it by making some lifestyle adjustments. If that is not possible, talk to your credit providers. We live in this country with all of our clients. We understand the current situation. We all want to help our clients. If you're a long-standing client, you put up your hand, you ask for help proactively, the chances of your bank or other credit providers really bending over backwards to try and assist you are significant. And then if all else fails, go and knock on the door of the more formal processes of debt review.
And Elmarie, really, obviously I engage a lot with consumers. So I see a lot of these interactions. And I think that is, Ester, if I want to end off on a really important point here, it is to engage before you get into trouble. Because once you start missing payments, trust is lost. As long as you can keep the trust relationship going and you're proactive and you're doing what you can to still meet your debts, I think the banks have come a long way, especially with COVID. There's a lot of understanding about the financial situation people find themselves in, but you've got to keep the trust going.
No, 100%. That's absolutely true. And, you cannot just put your head in the sand and hope that the problem's going to go away. I can tell you one thing, it's not going to go away. It's going to get worse. And if you miss payments, it's going to make it even more difficult for the bank to help you in any way whatsoever. So reach out earlier rather than later.
Well, fantastic. And thank you to all three of you. And hopefully this will give our listeners a little bit of insight into understanding their different options. Start off with, is there money that I can find, like cutbacks I can make? Second step, is an opportunity to restructure my debt? Third, if that's not an option, what are my options under debt review? But make sure that you understand what they are and don't race into anything, especially not debt review, without fully understanding your options. You've been listening to FNB Money Moves in partnership with Maya on Money, where we help you to make better financial decisions. So make sure you tune in to our next podcast.